Hello everyone, hope you're doing all right. Today we're talking about the Engineering Sniper, a spec that looks intimidating but is actually pretty darn straightforward. Read the disclaimer as usual, I am not an expert on this stuff, I'm just a nerd that plays a lot of SWTOR, so if you have any recommendations, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I'm sure your fellow players would appreciate it. Tertiary stats, accuracy, 110% in PvE, and then you can kind of dump it in PvP. For your alacrity, you want to get to like 7.2% alacrity, and then just throw everything else into crit and you should be ready to rock and roll. For your tactical, ruthless interrogation is what we're going to be focusing on. It's going to be refreshing our interrogation probe and increasing the damage of our electrified railgun. For PvPers, you want to take ionic discharge. We'll do that in a separate video because I have the foreign view somehow. Essentially, just apply a probe, apply an interrogation probe, and then EMP discharge for a whole bunch of damage. That'll be a separate video. Don't worry about it. We're focused on the fundamentals here. For your legendaries, this is legendaries, not tacticals, energy regulators package is going to fix all of our energy issues. Engineering is currently energy negative with our rotation, which is really sad, so you kind of have to take the energy regulators package. Then we're going to take the locked and loaded package for the extra 5% tech and range damage. It is just flat damage. We love to see it. For our skill tree here, laser targeting, more explosive probe damage, love to see it. 27 is kind of a toss-up. Takedown if you're doing more long-term fights, so you get to have these, burn phase options for takedown. Otherwise, just take Shadow Snipe. It's perfectly fine. Moving the line here, critical interrogation is going to increase our critical chance all the time. It's fantastic. Targeting beam is going to increase our critical hit damage, which is very nice, especially combined with critical interrogation. Ballistic dampeners, useful always. Ruthless efficiency, useful always. In PvP, you can take Maim. In PvE, take Ballistic Shield. Sometimes you can take Hollow Locate if you really want to. Kind of up to you. Finally, take Seek Cover. You can use Augmented Shields if you want to, but Seek Cover is going to be useful more often. Now, why is this spec weird? It's because there's a lot of stuff going on that if I just threw it all at you, you'd probably be overwhelmed. I don't blame you. There's a lot of weird stuff happening with engineering. Let's talk about our primary abilities first. The most important ability is the ability we only use once a fight. It's called Interrogation Probe. It does 41,000 damage over the course of the next 18 seconds, and only one can be out at a time. So it's not that you can be tab targeting and throwing interrogation probes at everyone. You can only throw one probe on at a time. Interrogation probe is a dot, and so what that means is that it will slowly take its damage over time. You can track how the probe is doing by looking at your target's debuff tray and saying, yes, I can see that this dot is slowly ticking down over time. Now, because of our tactical here, called Ruthless Interrogation, every time you use your series of shots, interrogation probe's duration will be increased, or refreshed rather. So what that means is that if I let this tick down for a little bit and I can hit my series of shot button, boop, 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 you're going to see this interrogation probe slowly tick back up to its full duration. Now you're going to notice that something else is going on every time I use my series of shots. We're going to get this little purple debuff here that says it's called Electrified Railgun. It stacks up to 3 times. It is a little dot that ticks every time you have a tick of series of shots, a tick of fragmentation grenade, a tick of snipe, or a tick of takedown. So what we're doing here is that we are going to be building a rotation to make sure that we have 3 stacks of Electrified Railgun on the target at all times by using our series of shots, frag grenade, snipe, and takedown. Now you're going to notice here that every time we have 3 stacks of Electrified Railgun, EMP discharge is going to be glowing. What's happening there? Well, your EMP discharge damage is increased based on how many stacks of Electrified Railgun you have on the target. There's a lot going on here. Trust me, I know we're going to make this really simple. All you have to know is that when you have 3 stacks of Electrified Railgun, your EMP discharge would do a whole lot more damage. That's why it's glowing, so you can hit it, boop, and then do a whole bunch of extra damage. So let's recap real quick. Interrogation probe, dot, on the target. Electrified Railgun's built by a series of shots, fragmentation grenade, and snipe, and takedown. And then EMP discharge does more damage the more stacks of Electrified Railgun we have on the target. Now you're going to notice here every time we use our Electrified or EMP discharge, fragmentation grenade starts to glow. That's because the next frag grenade will be free. We love to see it. Every time you use your EMP discharge, your frag grenade will be free. Okay, there's one more dot we need to worry about here. It is our Corrosive Dart. Corrosive Dart does like 22,000 damage in the course of the next 18 seconds, which is, not a great amount of damage, but it applies a debuff here called Mark that's going to increase the amount of damage it takes from ranged attacks, which is very, very nice. So let's wrap that up for our dot section real quick, and then we can talk about doing damage with our other abilities. So, Interrogation Probe, on the target, does a whole bunch of damage and is refreshed by a series of shots. Using a whole bunch of our abilities, like series of shots, frag grenade, snipe, and takedown, will build stacks of electrified railgun. Electrified railgun, 3 stacks, means that we will do more EMP discharge damage. EMP discharge means that our frag grenade will be free. Great, love to see it. And then corrosive dart means that we're going to be doing more damage to the target 24/7. Those are our 3 primary dots. Interrogation Probe, series of shots, which is going to cause us to get our stacks of electrified railgun, and then corrosive dart. Now let's talk about how we're going to be doing some more of our burst damage, focusing on Explosive Probe. Explosive Probe, when applied to the target, will sit here until you attack the target. Once you attack the target, it's going to boop, detonate, and do a whole bunch of damage. It's also going to leave these little cluster bombs on the target. You see here we have 3 stacks of cluster bombs, which we can then detonate by attacking the target further. We have this very nice screen shaking animation letting us know that our cluster bombs are detonating. It's an extra way to have that little bit of extra damage after we use our Explosive Probe. Essentially, it's just a lot of damage that you have to trigger by actually hitting the target. That's all you need to know for your Explosive Probe. More abilities. I promise I'll make this all very, very simple. Promise, promise, promise. Next ability is going to be our Plasma Probe. Plasma Probe does like 21,000 damage in the course of the next 9 seconds, which is actually pretty darn good for an AoE ability. It is an AoE ability, meaning that's going to have a little circle here, but if you double click it, it will be applied right on top of the middle of the target that you're currently focusing on. It's also going to apply this Overwhelm debuff, which is going to increase the damage it takes from area of effect attacks, which means that your next Plasma Probe is going to do even more damage, which is pretty darn nice. We have another AoE ability here called Orbital Strike. Orbital Strike has a 1-second cast, does about 22,000 damage, and then it's a giant AoE, calls in a laser from the sky. It's pretty darn cool, does a whole bunch of damage per tick. We have our Snipe. Snipe will build a stack of electrified railgun. It is a 1.5 second cast, does a moderate amount of damage. It's more useful for keeping these stacks of electrified railgun on the target than anything else, but it's pretty darn nice. We have our Fragmentation Grenade, which is going to refund us 5 energy every time it hits the target, which is nice for maintaining our energy. It also has a little bit of AoE component to it, so it's going to do like 20,000 damage to the target and then like 10,000 damage to everyone standing next to it. So for example, if I wanted to murder Khalil, I totally could by using my Fragmentation Grenade. It's very, very nice. Finally, we have Takedown, which is only useful on targets below 30% health. Once your target's below 30% health, you can use your Takedown. It builds a stack of electrified railgun, does a whole bunch of damage. So let's recap this massive onslaught of abilities real quick before we dive into things and build this little rotation. It's actually pretty straightforward. Interrogation Probe, on the target, is refreshed by a series of shots. A bunch of our abilities are going to be building our stacks of electrified railgun. We love to see it. So a series of shots does a whole bunch of damage. Once you hit 3 stacks of electrified railgun, EMP discharge will start to glow. It'll do more damage. Boop, love to see it. Fragmentation Grenade will then be free afterwards. Boop, love to see it. Corrosive Dart marks the target, makes it take a whole bunch of damage, and does damage over time. Love to see it. Explosive Probe detonates on damage, and then every time you do damage afterwards, the screen is going to shake and let you know you're doing more damage. We love to see it. Snipe is a great filler ability. Love to see it. Plasma Probe is a great little AoE ability. Will make the target take more AoE damage, which is pretty darn nice. And then finally, our Orbital Strike does a whole bunch of AoE damage over time as well. Now, I can hear the brain spinning and being like, that's a whole lot of stuff I need to remember. It's actually pretty darn straightforward. What I've done here is I have built out our rotation just by using a couple of quick bars. So, the rotation is broken up into essentially 2 blocks. We're going to focus on series of shots into Plasma Probe. Because series of shots has a 2.75 second cast time and it has a cooldown of 8 seconds, it leads very well into Plasma Probe. So what that means is that every time we use our series of shots, the next ability we're going to use is Plasma Probe. We'll be using series of shots on cooldown, which means that we'll be using Plasma Probe on cooldown as well afterwards. So all you really have to do is memorize 2 different 3 ability blocks to make sure that we're keeping all of our abilities up at the same time. And this will keep our series of shots on cooldown, and we'll keep our Plasma Probe on the target 24/7. So essentially, all you need to know is that we're going to be using series of shots, then Plasma Probe, and then 3 abilities afterwards. All right? So series of shots, then Plasma Probe, then 3 abilities afterwards. The 3 abilities that come here and there will be Fragmentation Grenade, Snipe, Explosive Probe, and then EMP, Frag, Corrosive Dart. Frag, Snipe, Explosive Probe, EMP, Frag, Corrosive Dart. That's it. That's it. So let's demonstrate this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the fundamentals of this afterwards. So we're going to start off by making sure we have an Interrogation Probe on the target. Interrogation Probe is not included in our rotation because it's refreshing all the time. So let us now begin. Let's start just by going from series of shots on, and then we'll see how it goes. So series of shots into Plasma Probe, and now we walk down the line here. So EMP, Frag, Corrosive Dart, series of shots, Plasma Probe, Frag, Snipe, Explosive Probe, series of shots, Plasma Probe, EMP, Frag, Corrosive Grenade, SOS, PP, Frag, Snipe, Explosive Probe, SOS, PP. All right, it's actually relatively straightforward. Just know that these 10 abilities need to line up in order, and it's even more simple than that because we're basically spending our series of shots on cooldown and then following with Plasma Probe, and then just following these 2 little 3-button rotations, and then that's kind of it. It's actually relatively straightforward. So what we're doing here is we're maintaining all 3 of our dots on the target by using our electrified railgun, by using our interrogation probe, and by using our corrosive dart. We are essentially maintaining all 3 of our dots. We are using our high damaging abilities right as they come off of cooldown, and we are essentially just being energy positive, and it's great. It's a nice little smooth rotation. So if you can remember that you need to SOS and then PP, and then just follow these little 3 blocks of Fragmentation Grenade, Snipe, Explosive Probe, and then SOS, PP, I'm a child, and then EMP Discharge, Frag Grenade, Corrosive Dart, SOS, PP. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Not as difficult as people can remember. All you need to do is sit down at a target dummy and essentially just practice this over and over and over again. You can literally set up these bars if you want to, and then you should be ready to rock and roll. Now you're going to notice here that I have my Orbital Strike hovering above the Snipe button here. This is because Orbital Strike will actually replace Snipe in our rotation. So what that means is that anytime that Orbital Strike comes off cooldown, because Orbital Strike has a relatively long cooldown, we'll actually be using Orbital Strike in place of Snipe in this rotation. So if you see here, we're applying our Privatization Probe. Now we're going to go Frag Grenade, and then what? Orbital Strike? Whoa, that's crazy. Explosive Probe, series of shots. And that's the only difference that you need. That's the only thing you really need to worry about. It comes down to every 2 rotations, you'll do a snipe, or every rotation you do a snipe, then you do a orbital strike, then you do a snipe, then an orbital strike, then you do a snipe, then your orbital strike. But it's not that difficult. As you can see here, this rotation is now energy positive. If you're not using the energy regulators legendary, it's not going to work this well. You'll just be energy negative, which is kind of tragic. But for the rest of us, this is really all you need to know. Just memorize these 3 little blocks between your SOS and your PPs, and then you'll be fine. You'll be doing perfectly adequate damage for your raid team. We love to see it. Now we do have a couple of buffs here. For example, targeting systems. Targeting systems is going to increase the critical chance of our explosive probe by 100%. We love to see it. It does a whole bunch of damage, which is pretty darn nice. Additionally, it's going to increase your probe damage by 10% for the next 20 seconds. So if you see here, if I use my targeting systems, we get this little buff called Systems Upgrade, which is going to increase the damage of all of our probes by 10% for 20 seconds, which is, pretty darn nice. It's also going to make our auto crits for our explosive probe. You essentially just want to smash targeting systems on cooldown. Anytime it's off cooldown, just pop, hit it right away, and you should be ready to rock and roll. Quick note here, as I didn't mention it before, we do have to be in cover for this. If you're a sniper and you don't know what the cover system is, you want to replace it with crouch. Just use your crouch button. That way you're not going to be rolling all over the place. You'll be just crouched wherever you are, and you'll be entered into cover that you can benefit from that energy management provided by energy regulators, which is very, very nice. It does make you immobile, but that's okay. Who needs to move anyways? We're snipers. For our defensive cooldowns, we have a couple of options here. We have our covered escape. Covered escape will make you immune to damage for 1 second and will roll you forward 18 meters. Additionally, on engineering, it's going to leave little mines behind us that will detonate after a hot second, which is, very, very nice. It's more of a movement thing than anything else, but you can roll stuff, which is, cool. If, for example, you can roll like Doom in Dread Guards, etc. So if you have great timing, you can use your covered escape to get out of Terry situations. We also have a shield probe here. Shield probe will absorb like 30,000 damage, which is pretty darn nice. It's not great, not terrible. It beats a poke in the eye. Additionally, we have our Entrench. Entrench makes you immune from being stunned or knocked away, which is very nice. Additionally, it's going to decrease your AoE damage taken by 60%, so it's great for PvEers who are trying to not move a whole bunch, and if you have to stand in some AoE, that's fine. Just pop your Entrench, you should be good to go. We also have our Cover Pulse here, which will knock people away if they're getting too close and touching you in your no-no zone. You can always hit them with Cover Pulse. For PvPers, we have our Diversion, which is going to decrease accuracy by 45%. This doesn't work on operations bosses, which is kind of sad. But if people are jumping on you, this will also knock other snipers out of cover, which is very, very nice. Get them out of there. Decrease their defense chance. You love to see it. Finally, we have our Meticulous Preparation, which is going to reset the cooldown of our countermeasures, Shield Probe, Cover Pulse, and Entrench. So if you need that little extra bit of defense, you can always pop your Meticulous Preparation. You should be ready to rock and roll. Looking quickly at an opener here, and then we should wrap things up. Our opener is going to look like Orbital Strike into a snipe by popping in targeting systems, and then any other buffs that you have. Explosive Probe, Interrogation Probe, and then right into it. So series of shots, Plasma Probe, and then right into your rotation of Ion Discharge, Grenade, Dart. And then you're just back into this rotation, and then you just repeat this until either the target or you is dead. And that's really all there is to know. As you can memorize this little 10-button rotation here, filling in Orbital Strike for snipe whenever it's applicable or whenever it's available to you, you should be ready to rock and roll. Once you reach burn phase, you're going to replace this fragmentation grenade with a takedown. I'm sorry, the fragmentation grenade before snipe or Orbital Strike with takedown. It's just straight up more damage. It's great. That's why it's located here on my little priority system. I'll take a quick picture of this if you want to copy it and blow it up, so that way you too can just rebuild this little. He's crying for no good reason. You too can rebuild this little rotation, so that way you know what button to push next. It's relatively straightforward, and then you should be ready to rock and roll. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to get back to you. But that's all I have. Hopefully this simplified a once intimidating spec that you too can now enjoy, flexing on the nerds that don't know how engineering works, because it's a very rare spec. So, that's all I got. You take care now. Bye-bye.